Good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Thursday and happy Independence Day to those of us here in America. Wonderful day. Apologize for just getting this out. It is also my daughter Juju's birthday. We've been celebrating that this morning here while I'm on vacation. But anyway, we've got a storm that has been just defying the odds here, now moving away from the Cayman Islands, aiming towards Mexico and eventually Texas here over the holiday weekend and some changes and some adjustments in the forecast, but the overall idea is that the storm continues to be resilient. So what I'm going to do in this video is just share the latest, talk about some possibilities, what we know, maybe what we don't know, and kind of give you guys an idea of what I expect to happen. So thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you all and your time today. I'm going to try to keep this a little bit quicker, pretty much just spend my time on Beryl, even though we do have nasty heat out west, record highs in California, some severe weather across the central U.S. and Ohio Valley, and lots of lightning. And if you are planning to be outdoors the next few days, this is the time of year when lightning claims the most lives in the U.S. So please take it seriously, even if there's not a severe thunderstorm warning. Getting to Beryl here, we now have a Category 3 storm. It has weakened some, but continues to hold its own and moving away from the Cayman Islands this morning. So we had a very close call with Jamaica and the Caymans. The eye wall came very close to these islands and caused some damage, but not as bad as it could have been if it had tracked a little farther north. As a result, the storm is still kind of holding her own, still a Category 3, but likely going to weaken below that level to a Category 2, which, in my opinion, because the storm has grown, because it is well intact, still can be a very dangerous storm, although fortunately not as bad as what it would be if it were a Category 4 or 5. So we're going to see a track towards the Yucatan Peninsula overnight tonight, landfall towards morning on Friday, and then a track continuing where it will reemerge into the Gulf of Mexico Friday night, early Saturday morning, and may have a couple of days to reorganize and re-strengthen some as it aims towards the U.S.-Mexican border, and maybe perhaps even curls a little bit farther up the coast of South Texas, which is something I've been talking about here. Here's the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. You can see the storm yesterday at this time came close enough to South Jamaica to produce hurricane force winds with the storm's northern eye wall. It then pulled away yesterday around 8 in the evening and then made its nearest approach to the Cayman Islands this morning around 8 a.m. as a major hurricane. Now, as the day wears on, this storm will likely continue to slowly weaken into a Category 4 storm. And official forecast from the Hurricane Center is a Category 1 storm at 8 a.m., but it may still make landfall at a stronger intensity than that. Cozumel is in the path of this storm and would be potentially in the worst part of it. Any adjustment to the north would save some time over land and weaken the storm less. More time over land or a further south track would mean more weakening would be expected from this storm. We have a hurricane warning from Cancun southward to just east of Chetumal. That includes most of the Yucatan Peninsula on the Caribbean side or Caribbean side. Tropical storm watch, hurricane watch, tropical storm warning a little farther south and west to the Belize border. Tropical storm watch in effect for northern Belize, including Belize City. The Cayman Islands are still under hurricane warning. That will probably be lowered to a tropical storm warning and then should be canceled by this evening as the storm continues to move away. On the Gulf side here, we do have a hurricane watch and tropical storm warning for the northeastern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula and a tropical storm warning for the entire north coast and all the way down to Campeche, including Merida in Mexico. As we move to tomorrow, I expect that we'll see hurricane watches posted, probably for northeastern Mexico and deep South Texas. There's a possibility that watches may get extended farther north, depending on how far north the system goes. But right now, the trend is for it to strengthen, perhaps to hurricane strength before a second landfall near the U.S.-Texas border, or near the Mexico-Texas border. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But either way, the uncertainty grows here, and that's one thing I do want everybody to focus on, that there's a potential this stays out over water longer and comes further up to the middle coast of Texas, perhaps putting Houston and Galveston on the right side of things. There's a possibility it could stay a little bit weaker and go farther south towards Tampico. But right now, the current track does take it into Texas no matter what, with weakening after landfall. Here's a look at the wide view of the Caribbean and Gulf. And you can see still a pretty impressive size system, although it has weakened due to wind shear and some dry air in its face. We do also have a thunderstorm cluster behind it, AL96, which right now has pretty much no chance of developing until Beryl gets out of the way. So it's just going to follow in its coattails and ride it, but probably will not strengthen into a tropical depression or storm. A couple days ago, it looked like it might, but that was before Beryl got to strengthen to the point that it did. And now, as a result, Beryl is no longer favorable to AL96L. You can see kind of this wind shear coming out of it. So this storm is going to continue in this direction towards Cozumel, and then a bend towards the left, and it may happen, or a bend towards the right, but it may happen here, it may happen here, or it could still happen here. So a lot of uncertainty here still as we head into the weekend, and a lot of folks still need to be watching this system very closely. Sorry for my mouse here. I'm doing this on a table outside, and it's a little bit jumpy, unfortunately. All right, so you can see on the satellite now our system is pulling away from the Cayman Islands. This is Grand Cayman right here. You can see the center is right about here, now cloud filled, but there is still an eye wall surrounding the majority of it. This is Grand Cayman. This over here is Cozumel, and this is the Isla de Mujeres in the northeastern portion of the Yucatan, and both of these islands are likely going to get the worst of the wind, although areas at the coast, including Cancun over here, are at risk as well of hurricane conditions. Farther south, I don't think this is going to be as bad. If the track continues to go north of you, you will get some tropical storm conditions, maybe briefly hurricane force wind gusts, but unlikely to see the brunt of it, as most of the weather here is on the northern and eastern side, and that is due to the wind shear we have out of the west here, taking the cloud tops and kind of blowing them off to the north and east. However, there's still some pretty good outflow here, so the storm is still ventilated pretty well, but it's definitely a top-heavy storm due to the wind shear that's coming in here from the west part of the storm. We'll take a look here as well at the water vapor imagery, and you can see there is a trough to the north of the system, high pressure to the north and east, and we do have an upper level low here, but it is moving away from east to west. With the upper low, we do have some wind flow out of the southwest that is keeping the storm from growing on the western and southern side, but both are actually moving away in tandem. So the wind shear, while it has been a little bit problematic for Beryl, it has not been enough to just stop the system completely. It is kind of minimal at this point compared to maybe what it was forecast to be a couple of days ago. And you can see that here on the Gulf water vapor image as well. Everything is kind of backing away and giving Beryl some space. So the only thing that's really going to cause Beryl to weaken will be its time spent over the Yucatan later tonight into the day tomorrow. It may weaken some more until then, just due to the fact that it is losing a lot of its opportunity to grow on the western and southern side. But at the same time, land is what's going to make the difference here. The other question is, are things going to be still favorable when it gets into the Gulf of Mexico? And there are still some discrepancies in future forecast models and how that's going to play out. I will show you that in a minute. Here is aircraft data from earlier showing that the central pressure of the storm has risen into the 970s. If you remember, a few days ago, it was in the 930s, so definitely getting down below the major hurricane threshold. You can also see that the strongest winds are pretty tight to the center here. It's definitely not as big a storm as it was a few days ago, as winds have dropped off quite a bit, fortunately for Grand Cayman. You can see here earlier with the wind information, the strongest winds here managed to avoid Grand Cayman by about 25 miles right here. So a very close call for those of you. You still had hurricane force wind gusts, but the worst of the wind remained off to your south and west. If this had made a right wobble like it did towards Jamaica yesterday afternoon, we would be talking a totally different story. But unfortunately, in the land of tropical forecasting, this is just what we have to deal with, that uncertainty. Let me get that off the screen for you guys here. But right now, you can see the radar from the Caymans still shows a pretty well-defined eye. The southern part of the eye wall is a bit disrupted, but still a pretty good eye here. This is not weakening very quickly as it pulls away from Grand Cayman over here. So, we're going to keep watching the radar. There'll be another plane that goes into this in the afternoon. But you can see here on the last couple of frames that the eye wall is, in fact, open here kind of on the southwest side, right in here. So it is struggling a little bit here to keep its structure, but still keeping somewhat of its structure and composure as it moves west-northwest. We're looking at a lot of rain coming through the Caribbean here tonight and tomorrow, potentially over 10 inches of rain on the Yucatan, as well as into the southern and western Gulf of Mexico. Here is the track from the National Hurricane Center showing it re-strengthening back to hurricane force here at 8 in the morning at landfall, maybe a little before then, sometime here on Sunday. But the storm has actually slowed down a little bit, and maybe by as much as 12 hours from yesterday's forecast. And so what that means is it's going to spend more time over the Gulf of Mexico and potentially could strengthen a little bit more with that time here. It will continue to be relatively slower over Texas. Those of you in Texas are aware that slowing storms can cause a lot of rain. We've seen that with quite a few of these, and something we're going to have to continue to watch. Unfortunately, I don't think wind is going to be as much an issue for Texas as it will be rainfall. Some of you do need the rain, but you may get more than you bargained for. Here's the wind swath. The red indicates the hurricane force winds, which impacted the southern and western tips of Jamaica yesterday, just narrowly avoided Grand Cayman. But right now, our aim near or just to the south of Cozumel overnight tonight. Tropical storm force winds may affect the northeastern tip of the Yucatan, including Isla de Mujeres as well. Here's a look at our track and when winds are likely going to go downhill. And we're going to see winds going downhill around midnight tonight, around Cozumel, a little bit later around Cancun, and as well as Belize during the overnight, early morning hours of Friday. Strongest winds will be during the morning Friday over the Yucatan, and then winds should calm down Friday evening. Winds will start picking up here on Sunday near the Gulf Coast of Mexico and Texas, but depending on how far to the right this goes, we could see some more slowing of the storm's progress. Ensembles have shifted northward here in the short term. Meeting the storm could potentially spend a little bit less time over the Yucatan than maybe what was predicted here a couple days ago, where it was aiming more for the Belize Yucatan border. And as a result, a little bit more time over the Gulf. And the mean of all the models takes the landfall literally about 20 to 30 miles south of South Padre Island, almost right at the border with the U.S. and Mexico. 12Z models have all pretty much killed the idea of this weakening and going off to the west. Almost all of them bend it to the north. You've got some models that make that turn and bring it in just south of the border by as much as 50 miles, others which scrape the coast and bring it in near Corpus Christi, and even a couple that bring it farther up the coast, closer to, say, Port Lavaca in Texas. Nothing bringing it into Houston, but the closer this bends, the more likely we see that heavier rain and gusty winds coming up into Galveston Bay, and that's certainly a possibility. Here's a tweet from meteorologist Yakov Cantor, showing that the ensembles and how they've performed so well, the stronger solutions, those are the ones in pink, have ended up being more correct, with Beryl being observed kind of on the northern side of these. So we can kind of discount these weaker southern solutions. Also, you can see those members, if you transcribe them and transpose them, bring the center very close to Cozumel and a little bit farther north, with less time being spent over the Yucatan. That will, of course, impact how the storm comes out of the Yucatan over the Gulf. The less time it spends over land, the stronger the storm structure can remain, although it will weaken. And you can see models overall have not done great. According to meteorologist Andy Hazelton, you can see they all have over forecast the amount of weakening. And in fact, the weakening trend has been less. And as a result, the system is probably going to gain a little bit more latitude than what earlier models showed. The GFS brings the system basically right to the border. The ensembles, though, have a lot of spread. Pretty much nothing going to Louisiana other than one rogue model, but pretty much everything goes middle Texas coast down to northeast Mexico. Only one model takes us south and westward, which I don't think will be the case unless the system really weakens. And right now, it doesn't look like that happens. The intensity forecast does show weakening to Category 2 this afternoon, maybe Category 1 before landfall, maybe still, though, Category 2 with landfall here in about less than 24 hours. Weakening should continue, but it's possible this system could remain a hurricane when it enters the Gulf of Mexico later tomorrow from the Yucatan if it spends less time over land. Other models show it getting down to tropical storm strength, but many of those show some re-strengthening close to hurricane intensity. So if you move this out to Sunday, you can see the possibilities are still very large in spread between tropical storm and Category 2 intensity. And if the system spends just a little more time over the Gulf of Mexico waters, we may see this trending upward again, which is what we don't want to see, unfortunately. Here's the upper level pattern showing the upper level ridge here over Georgia here tomorrow morning. That is going to weaken, and there's going to be a trough dropping down into Arkansas, Missouri, and Illinois. That will allow an opening for this system to start gaining more latitude, making more of a bend to the right, and perhaps making a closer approach to South Texas here, with the time frame being sometime Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. A lot of uncertainty with a storm slowing down like this. We may see it try to stay just offshore. We may see it coming inland more, but they all show weakening in the steering currents, allowing the system to still be in our picture for Tuesday. And oh, by the way, the GFS says this Invest 96L is going to bring more moisture in on Tuesday night and Wednesday into some of the same areas, and that will enhance our rainfall totals. Now, if you take a look at wind shear, and this map is a little bit tough to make out. So this here is Jamaica. This is the Yucatan Peninsula right here. You can see the wind shear in the path of our storm right here is moderately or neutral, unfavorable. So it's not fully unfavorable. We're not seeing strong wind shear like we see here in the Gulf, 30 knots. We're seeing more like 15 to 20, but it is affecting the storm. Now, as we move on into time here, what we'll see is that the strongest wind shear out of the northeast actually backs off to the west. So there is still some room for this system to kind of hold its own until it makes landfall. It should probably weaken a little bit more, but it may not weaken as much as earlier predictions due to the fact that this strongest wind shear continues to kind of back off to the west and gives Beryl some space. And as we look off into time here, you can see the wind shear forecast from the ship's model is in fact decreasing. Now it's doing it while the system is over land and then re-emerging into the Gulf, but the less the wind shear is, the less the system is going to lose its structure, and the more likely it comes out into the Gulf as a system that has the potential to grow again. Now, as this system moves into Texas, the wind shear picks up, but that's because it's gaining latitude. At that point, it's just a rainmaker. The other issue we've dealt with today is lower relative humidity, some drier air here, and you can see that percentage, 55%. Now, as the system heads closer to the Yucatan, it is actually going to become a little more favorable here. We're going to see more moisture in place and an increase in moisture of about 10%. As a result, the system may not weaken quite as much as what some of the forecasts are showing right now, and I would be preparing for a Category 2 storm. It probably is not going to rapidly intensify, but it is going to have a chance to survive the Yucatan and may have a chance at growing again in the Gulf of Mexico. You can see that on the GFS here. While we do have wind shear and some dry air on the south side, we still have some favorable weather on the northern side of our system, and as a result, the pressure should drop some. Here's a look at some of the tropical models, which also indicate that. This is the H-WRF. It does weaken over land, but it's back out Friday afternoon and evening, and then pressures are dropping here, especially in the final hours before landfall. It's got a pressure drop of about 20 miles per hour, and so as a result, the storm will likely be a hurricane when it comes in and possibly a Category 2 storm. If it tries to come farther east and spends more time over the Gulf, there may even be a chance it tries to become a major hurricane again, but that could be a little far-fetched, which is something this storm has been, far-fetched, if you can believe that. Here's a look at the closer view of Beryl, showing a little bit of strengthening overnight tonight. Pressure's dropping until it makes landfall, spends about 16 hours over land, weakens as a result, then tries to reorganize, and by the time we get to Sunday morning, has an opportunity in the Western Gulf to try to strengthen again with landfall pretty much right on the U.S.-Texas border, or the Mexico-Texas border. Sorry, folks, I'm trying. You can go ahead and poke fun at me and criticize me. I will take one for the team here. But the important thing here is that it does slow down as it moves northward. It will weaken over South Texas, but there will be some strong winds, probably some tornadoes in the right front quadrant, and certainly a lot of rain as well. HAFS model is not done as well as the H-WRF, but I will show it to you. You can see it comes out weaker here, and as a result, it's going to go farther south. I don't necessarily believe that's the case, but even here in the final frames, you can see that it's struggling to make landfall, still taking its sweet time here. Here's a closer view here, and you can see that weakening during the morning tomorrow. The low's actually going to be up here. I don't know why it's analyzing it down here. But the important thing is that after the system reemerges into the Gulf later tomorrow night, the pressure should drop again, and it should drop even more as it gets closer to land. Take a look at this right turn here. It just doesn't want to make that landfall. Finally, it does so, but not until late Sunday night, early Monday morning, and then it'll head northward and weaken with time as expected here. The HMON model, not my favorite tropical model, but it may be onto something here. Brings the strongest winds just south of Cozumel or very close to the southern tip, and then landfall and weakening after that. And then we'll start to see a strengthening trend here early in the day on Saturday as we move over warmer waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And then you can see the HMON does, in fact, hug the coast of Texas, brings it right along Padre Island, and a final landfall near Corpus Christi late Sunday evening as a Category 1 hurricane, and then weakening expected as it moves farther inland. And the ICON model does show this system gaining more latitude. And it may be onto something. It may just be an extreme outlier, but what you can see here is that it is making that bend farther eastward, and it is something you'll want to watch if you are in middle or the upper coast of Texas, including Houston. In fact, this is more of a track similar to Hurricane Harvey, a little bit closer with more of that right bend and that strengthening. This is an outlier, so it's not what I'm officially forecasting, but I still think there's a possibility something like this could play out. So that's what I'll be watching for you guys here. Here's a European wind field. Wind gusts will pick up here during the morning tomorrow, and then you'll see wind gusts picking up over the southwestern Gulf. And the Euro, in my opinion, is too far south with these strongest winds. Here's a look at the GFS, and you can see the winds are going to be gusting close to hurricane force offshore here in the evening on Sunday, and then near hurricane force along all of the lower Texas coastline here during the day on Monday. We could even see wind gusts to 50 miles per hour in places like San Antonio, 60 in Corpus. And if the GFS is right, Houston will avoid these strongest winds, but certainly not the rain. Speaking of rain, this is the blend of all of the models and shows us our rainfall potential for Texas. And you can see Sunday afternoon, we'll start getting some heavy rain bands. And then Sunday night and Monday, we have the chance to see 2 to 4 inches of rain, potentially more. The heaviest rain could be closer to the coast, but you'll see even as we get later into next week, there will be the potential for heavy rain, including Houston, maybe Beaumont, Nederland, Lake Charles, Sulphur, Port Arthur, and certainly around the coastal bend here, places like Victoria and Refugio. So that is what we're going to be figuring out here in the coming days. But as always, I thank you for your time today. I hope everybody has a safe 4th of July. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. I'm going to try to do another one here shortly. And as always, I thank you, but I give all the glory and all the credit and honor to God, who has given me so many blessings and joy and peace, no matter what is going on. We really can't change what happens in this world, but we can change how we react to it, how we treat each other. And with joy and with peace, we can forgive each other just as God has forgiven us by sending his son, Jesus, to die on the cross for us so that we can choose to live eternally with him if we accept him as our savior. And that brings me joy and it brings me peace. And I pray it does the same for you. If you haven't made that choice, I'm not going to judge you either. That is not for me to do. But please know that I will pray for you no matter what you believe, that you matter. You matter to me. You matter to God. And you still have a choice to make if you would like to. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.